So a disease. So let's say someone says you have hypertension. Okay, so you and the doctor and everybody you know, your family thinks you have a disease that you have to get rid of. But let's examine it. Now the body we know is doing everything out of wisdom. And the body sees that the arteries, because of the way you've been living your life, are a little bit plugged up. And it can't get the blood to the organs. And so the only way to get the blood to the organs is to raise the blood pressure. It's a matter of flow dynamics. It's got to get the blood there. If it doesn't get the blood there, you're dead. So, is the high blood pressure a problem? No, it's saving your life. It's a remedial effort. It's a curative measure that the body is going through. This process is necessary for you to be alive. So, now that we've had antihypertensive drugs around for 30 years, and we've done some longitudinal studies of it, what we're finding is that people that are on long-term antihypertensive drugs have cancer of all different organs at a much higher rate. Why is that? Well, blood delivers oxygen. What is cancer? An anaerobic situation. So if you have a continual, because you've lowered the blood pressure with a drug, so now you're not doing what the body would have done, which is increase the blood pressure to get enough blood to those organs. So now these organs are oxygen deprived at a low level. So you're dealing. So what you're doing is the consequence of taking this drug is a low level hypoxia. Not to be recommended to your friends. So that's what it is. Drugs. So now let's say you go to the doctor and they say, "Aha, you have diabetes." Oh my gosh, not diabetes. What is diabetes? Well, the hallmark of diabetes is insulin resistance. So why would the body be so stupid as to become insulin resistant? Well, well, the truth is this: you're eating too many carbs. Carbs are potatoes, rice, bread, and cakes and obvious things that they get broken down into glucose. What's the difference between starch and cellulose? What's cellulose? Cellulose is the backbone of plants. It's hard. It's indigestible. It's fiber. Okay, starch we store it as glycogen in our muscles and our liver. Okay, it's to be used later on. Okay, so there's starch is glucose molecules connected to each other by one kind of bond. Cellulose is glucose molecules connected to each other by a different kind of bond. Alpha versus a beta bond, just the direction of the bond, where it comes off on the molecule, but it's still just glucose molecules. So we have the enzyme to break down the starch ones and release the glucose. We don't for the cellulose. So the cellulose just comes through and kind of sweeps out the intestines. But our bacteria in our body can. And bacteria, one of the byproducts of the bacterial is of bacteria metabolizing cellulose is gas. And so people that go from eating a horrible diet to eating a raw food diet, or even a vegan diet, a cooked vegan diet, start saying, "I get so much gas now." Well, your gastrointestinal system is waking up your bacteria, but that just tells me that you have a dysbiosis. You shouldn't be getting gas. You should be able to deal with it right. And we'll talk about that if we have time. But I cannot overemphasize. I'm going to have to write a whole article on probiotics. I mean, if you can get them right, you don't need anything else. Okay, so now, diabetes. What is diabetes? Well, diabetes is insulin resistance, and it gets to different levels. Why is it insulin resistance? Because you're flooding the cells with sugar. Now, sugar or glucose is fuel, but it also is glue. And in fact, one of the hallmarks of aging is glycosylation and products of metabolism. Glycosylation means that a glucose got stuck onto a molecule. One of the ways we look for diabetes is not just by your blood sugar or your insulin level, but we look at a hemoglobin A1C, and that is looking at your glycosylated hemoglobin. How much is how much of your hemoglobin of your red blood cell is got little pieces of glucose stuck to it? Because that's going to tell us if it's a certain amount, that means you've had a high blood sugar we can go back 120 days because red blood cells live 120 days. So that gives us kind of a historic thing. So if your hemoglobin A1C is high, then we know you've been having this problem for a period of time. It's not just an acute, you went out and ate cake. It's different. So diabetes, it's kind of like what's happening is, have you ever driven on the freeway at 60 or 70 and put your head out the window? Try to talk. You can't talk. Dogs do it well. We can't. I don't know why that works, but dogs can do it. We can't. Anyway, we can't breathe. Okay? And that's the same thing. The cell's getting too much sugar. And so what does it do? Puts it, no more, no more. And what lets glucose in? Insulin. So you become resistant. So that insulin resistance, again, is a curative measure, a remedial process. It's saving your life. You would drown in sugar in no time. Okay? Cancer. Let's look at cancer. There's primitive organisms which are only capable of anaerobic metabolism, fermentation, glycolysis. Okay? That's what our cells do in the cytoplasm. But we have these little organelles inside of our cells called mitochondria. Mitochondria take oxygen, glucose, and take the product of glycolysis, pyruvate, turn it into 36, 38 ATPs. So from one molecule of glucose, you can get 36 to 38 ATPs. ATPs are energy molecules, or energy, the currency of energy. But the primitive organism that only does the fermentation gets 2 for every molecule of glucose. So that's a big difference. 2 times 19 is 38. So cancer cells are, what happens to a cancer cell is it becomes 19 times less efficient at energy production. So the way that this happens, since it's easy to understand, is that, remember, we live in a sea of toxins. As long as we continue to live in New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, how about the United States? Almost anywhere, even suburbia. Okay, so the off gas. I mean, we're swimming in toxins, right? And here we are all wearing, eating organic food and are we wearing organic underwear? No. Do you absorb anything down there? Perhaps. So I'm being real careful, and meanwhile I'm absorbing all this stuff into my body. So the point is that even if let's say you wore organic underwear, organic toothpaste, organic shampoos, you did all this stuff, now you're just getting what's off-gassing everywhere you go. So unless you stay home in your organic house, you're in trouble. Right? So, anyway, when the cells are surrounded by this sea of toxins, the most vulnerable part of the cell is the mitochondria, because the mitochondria is taking oxygen, and we know wherever there's oxygen, right? You don't want to light a match around oxygen, right? Because it's flammable. Well, on a biochemical sense, it's flammable. It produces oxidative byproducts, which are free radicals, which are rip-up cells. And actually, nature, this is not bad. Okay? Our immune system uses oxidation. That's how we kill bacteria, funguses, cancer, and viruses. When our immune system detects something foreign that doesn't need to be there, it immediately goes up there and begins to oxidize it. So oxidation is necessary. Okay, so it's not a bad thing. But in the mitochondria, the name of the process to take oxygen and glucose together is called oxidative phosphorylation. They use the energy of oxygen to put on these high-energy phosphate bonds. High-energy phosphate bonds are then able to be used as currency. So we need to have the sodium-potassium pump in every cell run. Let's say its charge is 40 ATPs a second. Okay, you got to have that amount, and this other enzyme system requires this and this. So that's the energy thing. And what is the energy that's being released? The energy that's being released is ATP, and ATP is the currency, and they break off that last phosphate and it releases electrons. And so it's electrons. And so our body is electrical. That's how it works. If I want to know how your heart's doing, I do an EKG, and I see your the shape of the waveform, of the electrical waveform that you're producing, right? And I can tell by the shape, the width, and all that sort of thing, and the P wave, I can see whether or not it's a good waveform. But if you have a waveform, things are happening. And that's electricity flowing. If you have a flat line, we have a problem. The same with your brain. You've been in the ICU for 3 weeks. You haven't been talking. We don't know if you're still with us. We do an EEG, an electroencephalogram. And again, normally actual electroencephalograms look like this. Again, if you have a flat line, we can remove life support. Okay? So we are electrical. And so the way in which we detect whether or not life is present is by its electrical output, its waveforms. Okay? What is electricity? It's the flow of electrons. What's an electron? Nobody knows. Not the greatest quantum physicist alive today can tell you what an electron is. Neither can they. Einstein could. No one knows. But it is what animates the flesh.